There's no reasonable or acceptable explanation for why the FBI stonewalled the committee for so long. In fact, it's taken so long to get this case filed, many of those members at the field on that fateful day are no longer in Congress. Today, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence released an oversight report based on the case file provided to the committee by Director Patel. The committee reviewed, based on FBI's records, both investigative actions taken and intelligence analysis conducted in support of FBI's conclusions on that premeditated, planned shooting targeting Republican members of Congress at Eugene Simpson Field in Alexandria, Virginia. Our report lays out that the FBI investigation was inconsistent with proper procedures and was supported by flawed intelligence analysis. Its conclusions failed to follow the facts as it reached an unsupported conclusion without completing even the most basic of investigative activities. Subsequently, under pressure from Congress and when aligned with new policy, the Bureau changed its conclusions, though it did not offer any new information, and was continued to be an incomplete investigative action. Analytic integrity and objectivity of the intelligence community, which is required by law, has been far too often thrown aside in high-profile events. Unfortunately, the committee's review found this case was no different. Through our oversight review, we found that the FBI prematurely declared the case to be, quote, suicide by cop, misconstruing information, misleading the public, and misrepresenting the facts. The FBI then spent 4 years guarding those determinations by obstructing congressional oversight. I will let Mr. Jackson share details of the report, but I will say it's unacceptable and alarming that the FBI would approach any investigation within its purview with this complete disregard and lack of investigative integrity. As I've said before, my tenure as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee will be marked by rigorous oversight of the IC to address the significant degradation of the intelligence community's investigative and analytic integrity. There have been far too many instances of failure to document the facts and present a conclusion that is unclouded by personal, political, or institutional bias. The House Intelligence Committee will continue to hold the IC accountable for the omission or suppression of key information in some assessments and the far too prevalent failure to respond to congressional oversight. Simply said, this boils down to the fact that Americans and their elected leaders need to be able to trust the IC. It's a national security imperative, and I'm hopeful that Director Patel's transparency with the committee bodes well that the administration intends to work with Congress to correct the failures and rebuild an IC that the American people can trust. Thank you, Chairman Jordan, for your partnership in overseeing the operations and activities of the FBI. I want to now hand it over to HPSI Oversight and Investigation Chairman, Dr. Ronny Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Chairman Crawford, for leading this issue and for your support of this oversight review. The American people deserve a government that is accountable and transparent. Oversight of the intelligence community is intended to ensure those in that community are held to this same standard. As the chairman of the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee, there is no greater priority than ensuring elements of the IC are employing proper investigative and analytic tradecraft independent of political considerations. That is why we worked around the clock to review the case file provided by Director Patel and publish this vital oversight report just weeks later. My subcommittee is conducting several ongoing investigations and oversight initiatives with a common thread. Intelligence analysis and assessments are falling short of the objectivity and integrity standards required by law. As Chairman Crawford already stated, it is extremely concerning that the FBI had enough confidence in their shoddy investigative efforts to conclude that this was, quote, suicide by cop and close this file. If you read the report, you will see this is absolutely ridiculous. Most notably, our report finds that there were no hard facts to support the FBI's suicide by cop conclusion. Based on our review of 3,000 plus pages provided to the committee, the only reasonable and quite frankly the very obvious determination was that this was an act of domestic terrorism. Despite those clear and contrary facts indicating domestic terrorism, the FBI's investigative efforts and intelligence analysis strained to reinforce this predetermined suicide by cop narrative. For example, to support the FBI analysis that this shooter conducted an opportunistic act of suicide by cop, the FBI analysis refers to comments by a family member speculating at the possibility based on a lack of significant number of fatalities. He didn't think that enough people died for that to be the case. Aside from being incredibly offensive to the 4 victims shot by the attacker, this analysis fails to note that the shooting began, there were absolutely no uniformed police officers anywhere around visible to the shooter. Further, the FBI analysis claimed that the shooter moved toward the gunfire. There was absolutely no support for this claim in the case file. The FBI did not conduct critical interviews with victims and eyewitnesses. As a result, no witnesses were given an opportunity to contradict this theory. On the other hand, the media did interview the eyewitnesses, and they found that the shooter targeted victims from a concealed position in order to protect himself. Finally, our report finds that the FBI's press release was used to mislead and influence public opinion. For example, the FBI told the public that the photos the shooter had taken at the baseball field, quote, did not represent surveillance of intended targets. Yet, the internal official report that we reviewed, the case file states, quote, the FBI assesses photos may indicate possible probing and casing. In addition, the FBI used deceptive language to hide the fact that the shooter had a handwritten manifesto, which was found in his van, indicating his real motive. His real motive was assassinating Republican congressmen to, quote, win back the power of the people. Regardless of political party, we must all stand united against political violence of any kind and condemn this violent attack as what it really was, an act of domestic terrorism. While I am deeply disappointed by the conduct of the FBI under Acting Director McCabe in 2017, I am encouraged by the transparency shown by Director Patel. I will continue to work with Chairman Crawford to bring integrity, objectivity, and accountability back to the FBI and the rest of the intelligence community. Long story short, we have a long way to go to rebuild and reestablish the trust and the confidence of the American people in the FBI, the DOJ, and our intelligence community. This starts that process. Thank you, and with that, I will turn it over to Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan to say a few words.
Suicide by cop, the guy had a hit list in his pocket. He had 6 names, Republican members of Congress, on a piece of paper in his pocket. Comey, McCabe, Wray, they all knew that it was domestic terrorism, but that didn't fit their narrative. Because this was the FBI that spied on a presidential campaign. This was the FBI that said if you're a parent going to a school board meeting, you need to be investigated. This was the FBI that said if you're a pro-life Catholic, you're an extremist. This is the FBI who raided President Trump's home. And this is the FBI who had 26 confidential human sources at the Capitol on January 6th. And it's the same FBI who can't tell us who planted the pipe bombs, who can't tell us who leaked the Dobbs opinion, and who can't tell us who put cocaine at the White House. So we shouldn't be surprised that they reached the wrong conclusion. They knew what the facts were, as Dr. Jackson just said and as the chairman just said. The good news is, as Ronny indicated, we now have folks running this organization who are actually focused on doing what the FBI should be doing, on getting the truth to the American people, on dealing with bad guys. Kash Patel's doing a great job. Pam Bondi at the Justice Department, Todd Blanche and their team are doing a great job, and that's the good news. So I want to thank the chairman, both the chairman of the subcommittee, the chairman of the full committee, and all these guys behind me who work on the Intel Committee for the good work they did over several years, as you know. And of course, we really want to thank, on that day, the Capitol Hill Police, who saved our colleague's life and did so much good work in a terrible situation. But for the FBI to give us this baloney and hang with that crazy story for this long, but for the work of these folks, we'd have never got the truth. But them telling us the wrong thing is consistent with all the other BS they did over the last several years. Thank goodness we got an FBI that's now focused on doing the work they're supposed to do. I yield back to the chairman.
Thank you. I thank the chairman, and I also thank Dr. Jackson, chairman of the subcommittee. You all have been provided with this report. I want to clear something up. This is not an investigation. This is a report, an assessment, if you will, of the FBI's investigation of that incident. So it's just important to note. I know this can be a difficult topic for folks here, particularly on Capitol Hill, but we're glad you're here today. And our committee's objective in this report is to address the analytic integrity issues as we've laid out here before you today. So with that, we've got time for a question or two if anybody wants to ask one. Yes, sir.
Would you look at other shootings as well, other mass shootings? Will you ask the FBI for their case file on those and also produce a report on other shootings?
If it's indicated, certainly. I think what we've seen here by asking for this was 8 years in the making, and obviously this was a very political in nature. As we've indicated here and as this report indicates as well, you know, this was not suicide by cop. There were some anomalies here that required that we be involved, and so we've got multiple courses of action we can pursue on any given number of topics, and but we're here today to talk about this particular incident.
Have you had any conversations with Leader Scalise about your report and what's his reaction to this?
Yeah, I'm not going to speak to Leader Scalise's personal response, but yes, we did. I spoke with him at length about this. He's very well aware, and as you can imagine, very difficult topic for him to address, but I'll let him do that on his own terms. But he was advised of this well in advance.
You touched on this at the top, but kind of go a little bit more into detail about how long you guys have been looking for answers, trying to get some assessment on what the FBI was looking at when it was doing its investigation.
8 years. We've been looking for 8 years. And it wasn't until back in March when we had our global threats assessment that Director Patel decided that he would comply because, I mean, obviously he understood what it was we were asking for and how long we had waited. That wasn't the first time we had asked by any means. There were members that are no longer in Congress that were part of this committee. There were members that are no longer in Congress that were part of other committees that had been trying for literally years to get that report. And so this report that you have in your hands today is the culmination of 8 years worth of requests, and so you know, hats off to Director Patel, but also to our staff here who's done a fantastic job in a very short time to be able to illuminate what the problems were with that report or with that investigation. One more? Anybody? Nope. All right, thank you all. We appreciate it.